Welcome for joining us today at our Regional Government Services Leadership Academy. This is our panel session, Keeping Organizational Culture on Track. As we know, organizational culture requires constant attention and alignment to navigate the complexity of today's local government environment. And as Peter Drucker famously stated, culture eats strategy for breakfast, highlighting the profound impact culture has on organizational success. So today we are joined by a panelist of seasoned local government leaders as they share how they've assessed their cultures, identified areas for improvement, and implemented changes to improve culture amidst cultural change, continual change. So we hope to integrate an understanding of the meaning of organizational culture and make changes to anticipate and respond to the challenges local governments and their leadership face to serve communities while meeting the needs and expectations of employees. So thank you for joining us today. My name is Indira Gagnon. I'm Senior Advisor with Regional Government Services. And before we get started, I'd like to encourage our attendees to ask questions throughout the session in Zoom's Q&A feature. And our technical host, Nancy Parchevsky, will keep an eye on the Q&A and chat questions. We would like to welcome today Barb Otis, Training and Organizational Development with Marin Municipal Water District, Dominique Burton, founder of Nubian Consulting, and former work with County of Marin and County of Alameda, and Conrad Fernandez, acting Deputy Director of the County of San Mateo Human Resources Department. So I'll go ahead and stop share. And thank you today for joining us. I would like to take this time for each panel member to introduce yourselves and if you would share briefly your background. Barb, if you would kick us off.
Sure. I'm Barb Otis. I am the Training and Organizational Development Manager with the Marin Municipal Water District. I've been in training and organizational development for approximately 25 years. Half my career has been in the private sector and half in public sector. So I'm really excited to be joining the panel and having the discussion on culture today. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Dominique, if you would help proceed.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Dominique Burton. I am a coach and organizational development professional and have been for almost 20 years now. I literally specialize in workplace culture transformations, driving data-informed initiatives that seek to unlock the potential of not only teams and organizations, but individuals as well. I have kind of run the gamut. I've been in local government for some years in various different agencies, organizations, and most recently, I've started my own LLC. But before that, I did a little spin in tech to see how global the world was. So happy to be here and provide some information.
Thank you so much for joining us. And finally, Conrad.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Conrad Fernandez. I'm acting Deputy Director currently at the County of San Mateo, where I oversee recruitment and retention efforts, as well as training and organizational development. Prior to that, I was the Organizational Development Division Manager. Prior to coming to the county, I worked for the City of San Jose, and then before that, in the UC system. So I've been in public sector for over 25 years. I started in the private sector, doing HR as a recruiter, and coming back to this work is so fundamental to everything we do. So I'm really excited to share my insights this afternoon.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for joining us today. So we'll begin with a foundational question to get everyone on the same page. Organizational cultures, we know, can be complex, a complex concept, right? And so I'd like to ask each of you, if you could define organizational culture as you understand it, and what role do you believe it plays in the success or effectiveness of a local government or local agency? Let's start with Dominique.
Great. For me, organizational culture is the sum of all the parts. I think I almost sometimes want to just say it's the personality. It's not only about the culture that you represent or the citizens you represent, it's also about when I say workplace, your employees, the people that are the who that are doing the work. So I think of it as personality. It's the sum of all the best parts of us. It's our attitudes, it's our behaviors, it's how our leadership styles come together. It's even a little bit from that government perspective of, and I know you've all heard it, so don't shoot the messenger, but we've always done it that way. It's even a little bit of that of like what is allowed and what isn't allowed, what's invited in, what's not invited in. So one of the things that I do try to focus on a lot is the innovation of it, that it has to continue to grow. It can't always just be the status quo. But that to me is literally the personalities, the organizational workplace, the culture.
Mm.
Thank
I'd
you.
like to add to that.
Yes, please.
Exactly. I was going to say the personality also of an organization. I do feel that it's what people feel, see, and experience in an organization. And seeing how they matter to that organization. I'm reading a great book right now called The Power of Mattering by Zach Mercurio, and he talks about that need, right, to feel valued, seen, and heard in an organization. And I think that's part of the culture. It's like what you're experiencing in that culture, and it's also how we interact with one another, how we talk about our culture to one another, and how we talk about our culture outside the organization to the public also. So it's all encompassing, as Dominique said.
Thank you for that. Yes, I absolutely agree. And to Dominique's point too, it can take on a beast of its own,
Mhm.
and it does somehow end up being the undercurrent of everything that happens in the space. Conrad, what are your insights?
Yeah, so I have three brief definitions. One would be the way we do things around here, right? So that's culture, the insider, outsider. It's very common in public sector. The second one, and this is from somewhere else, and I'm paraphrasing, it's not what we write on the walls, it's what we do in the halls, right? So it's like very true. We love to talk about strategic plans and values, and then what's happening in the halls. And then my spin on that, it's what happens in the halls when no one is looking. Because I think that's this piece, and my colleagues have shared a little bit about the othering and belonging. But what do leaders do when they feel like they can do whatever they want? That's to me culture. And we don't talk about that enough. So those are the
Right.
three little snapshots that I would say is culture.
Given that we see a lot of the same foundational issues where folks in the agency want to do things over and over again because it's always been done that way, how do you foresee a way to break out of that cycle? When when you've been in an atmosphere and an environment where this has been the thing that has been done um, without ruffling feathers, right?
Mm. I think you have to listen, right? You have to listen. You have to hear what people are are saying, their concerns, and find a way to work together collaboratively to address, the concern about why you want to do it the same way you've always done it. Um, I just think listening, right, and talking to one another is huge, and getting the understanding.
Absolutely. John, would you tend to agree with that as well?
Definitely. I think the listening part of it sometimes is what's missed. I also think it's this feeling, and I'm sure Conrad will lean into this one, how people believe that leadership dictates culture sometimes. And I don't feel like that's necessarily true. I feel like leadership can model, leadership can speak to, can influence, but they don't necessarily shape the culture. And I think the more we have empowered employees who realize they have a say, they have a part in it, we get better effectiveness. And so not only listening to people, but remembering, we talked about this just before we came on here, we were saying how you can have the most intended plan or strategic plan. But if there's no alignment, we're not going to get to effectiveness. And alignment comes from having voices from different perspectives that come together to role model better.
Yeah. I would add to that. Thank you. I think there's informal leadership and formal leadership. And in public sector, sometimes people get so caught up on the formal leadership, but you'll see the departments or the organizations that are effective. Usually it's somebody either in the front line or somebody who's a champion about something and they kind of drive a lot of efforts. But I do think leadership has a role. And it's a twofold part. I've seen when there's change, you get a very charismatic leader come in, they want to make change, but when they leave, that change goes away. But what's also been very helpful is to have a leader who knows that they're not charismatic, but they find champions in their organization who will do the work. And that's a great leader too. And that's why sometimes you get the informal leaders rising up because they've been given sort of that. But again, in a very hierarchical environment, sometimes, again, depending on the size, I think people feel stymied, like, oh, I can't do that because I don't have the title. But that's not necessarily true. We have a lot of, we call them champions in our organization. We have learning champions, engagement champions, wellness champions, and they drive a lot of the culture work because the department heads are so busy and the leadership teams are so busy. But what I always try to encourage is to make sure that they have some sort of access to the leadership teams so that they are getting that support at the end of the day.
I really do love that encouragement from leadership to drive the culture at the at the midline level, right? What has your experience has been with that drive from leadership top down to implement certain organizational culture or value, um, such that it reaches even those who may not be in the organization full time, right? And I know we have a lot of, I would call them transient employees, folks that are there seasonally, folks that are there on contract. Maybe they are very temporary. They yet to contribute to the culture of the organization, but from the top down, how have you been able to, in your respective environments, been able to drive that understanding of what the organizational culture looks like all the way to those levels?
I have to say, we just implemented a 1-year onboarding program at the district. And so we really look at culture as starting the first day an employee comes to work at the district. We are enculturating them from even before, I would say, through the recruitment process. But we have a very, what I would say, rich onboarding process. They have a 1-day orientation where they're meeting with various departments and it's human resources, finance. We're talking about our culture. We're talking about our commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. I mean, it's really driving it from when they first step into this organization. So the messaging around who we are, who Marin Municipal Water District is, and what we're about.
Can I throw a little pivot in there as well? And as someone coming from a public sector background and having worked in several different divisions and departments of these agencies, I find that there are silos. in every single one of them, and each area has their own culture, and whether or not it is in line with the organizations remains to be seen based on the perspectives of those who are in those particular silos. How have you, if you have any specific examples or insights on how you've been able to kind of break through those silos?
That is a great question. Um, and I agree with you. In my career, I have found that all organizations have silos. Where I have approached it is how do we communicate across the silos? And and that happens in various ways through you know team meetings. It happens through communications within organizations, through internal newsletters or paths for different types of communications. But I, I I don't think that we can break silos. I think they're here to stay, but it's how do we communicate across the silos so we come together. But I'd love to hear Dominique or Conrad's, experience with that, if you've had that successful experience breaking across silos.
So I would say again, size matters. So, if I'm in a county, so we have about 6,500 employees and then about 1,500 contractors. So anytime you're getting above several hundred people, that's the nature of life. You're going to have silos. Even within the small departments, sometimes you can have silos. So what we've done is have had programs that have across the board. And one of the programs I think I'm most proud of is we've done, there's a lot of work right now around mental health and wellness. And somebody had the foresight years and years ago to start a wellness program in the county. And our wellness program is over 25 years old. So, I mean, this is going way back. And we've continued to build on that. And that program now is one of our most robust programs. And what I've found is usually metrics and incentives really help change culture. So one thing we do, we have a program, we have a wellness manager award every year. So staff get to nominate a manager and who has supported wellness in the department. And it's such a great honor to be recognized. And it's just basically showing the organization that, hey, we think this work is important. Because most often, a lot of roles in management are, solving problems or discipline or this, that, and the other. And so to have staff nominate people, that really means a lot. And we've also instituted, like I said earlier, about these wellness champions. So we have wellness champions in the department. Now you've got wellness managers. We're looking at even supporting our directors with some sort of award. So the incentives building into the culture, then people start to pay attention. You'll still never get everyone who wants to do that. But again, that's sort of one way we've tried to do it. And then the other, we've done also been lucky that we've been doing engagement surveys for over a decade, right? So we've got a rich history of employee sentiment in the organization, what they feel. And we share that. We share that with department heads. Again, some take very close or pay close attention and take action. But again, in a large organization, you're always going to have that. But similarly, we try to have a engagement committee that's countywide. And so we try to bring people to the table. And that's all you can do as central HR, right? Ultimately, you've got to centralize. We're trying to build culture, but culture is both central and decentralized. So, there's pockets everywhere of some great work being done. There's pockets where could be a lot better, but I think that's the nature. But I think what's helping is when you incentivize something, you try to show it. People are competitive by nature. That seems to help.
Those are some great insights and actually some great initiatives especially with a group that size, and different belief systems in each one of those areas,
Mhm.
likely also because of the nature of services and the customers that they have and the stakeholders. So thank you for sharing that. Dominique, I know you had something to offer.
Well, quickly, I just wanted to say, I think the cross-functional teams around business initiatives, like he shared about wellness, at Marin, we had a workplace equity group, or We Champions. I've done cross-functional teams on result-based accountability, high performance, and it really has brought out that sense of belonging among people, but letting them be empowered to know that, oh, I do have a say in this culture. And of course, it was all blessed by leadership, but it's like you are the people that are out here doing the work. I think that kind of motivation is what people need. It's also an opportunity to develop. At Marin, we had peer-to-peer coaches that did conflict resolution. So if
Mm.
you had a conflict with a coworker, you could have a peer from another group to come in and help you mediate it so that you could get to mutual understanding about how you were going to move forward. And those are great, like, initiatives to start for people, but it also empowers people and it teaches them new skills, and it really helps them with development. So, all great opportunities.
Yes. Thank you. Conrad, you mentioned something earlier about utilizing metrics to help move the needle with instilling with helping to make sure that people understand and can instill the values of the organization through metrics. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so one of the metrics that we've used, and this is part of the engagement survey work, was there's a metric related to, let me see if I can just pull it up here for a second. But this idea, so we ask questions in our survey about, would you recommend the county as a great place to work, or would you recommend your department to a friend or relative? And in our budget process, we have performance measures. And we had created that metric as something that all departments had to report on. So just the very nature that departments had to go find that information and enter it, and it was part of the budget was really important. Because I think the struggle that I think we have in this space is that it's the return on investment is not clearly understood. Sometimes this feels like very like nice to have, touchy feely. It feels like, well, what really is this? What's the point? Or why do we need to do this? Well, I have so much other work, real work to do. This is fluffy. I've had somebody actually say the work was fluffy and didn't appreciate that. But because I don't think there's a real understanding of cost. I was also a budget analyst at one time, so and a program manager in a department. So I see the direct correlation of poor culture in high turnover, in poor morale, higher absenteeism, more sick days, people doing the minimum. All these are metrics that, me and my colleagues have been talking about internally, like how do we better articulate this is the cost of poor culture? But like I said, the positive side is having it shown in places like, oh, in performance measures, we're looking at culture. So that's sort of where the metrics are. And I would encourage everyone on this call to really think of, when you're thinking of this culture work, it needs to be tangible because everything somehow in public sector comes back to money. It comes back to the budget. And I think we're saying, but these things influence that, right? If you don't have to hire all the time, we just don't pay attention to the cost of losing people. Like I currently oversee our recruitment efforts, and there's just such a cost when talent leaves for the wrong reasons. Sometimes they leave for promotion, which is fine. But if it's because of culture, that's such a big cost, right? And it's hard for people to understand what that true cost is because it feels very subjective. And so I think metrics is really something that I think needs to evolve. I think it's something in our field over the next few years we need to get to. I know there isn't one easy metric to say, oh, this is the cost of poor culture. But I think we have enough tangible pain points that if we start to add them up, you can take a look at it.
Fantastic. Barb or Dominique,
Yeah.
do you have any specific or tangible ways that checks and balances is what I heard Conrad talking about also, right? In that process to keep us adaptable and accountable, whether it be to our budgets or to our community, and as a way to make sure that we can be in line and in tune with what our organization's espoused values, beliefs, and missions are, right? Are there some things that you're doing in your organizations along those lines?
Well, I have to say, I've just been with Marin Water for a year, so I still feel new in this organization, but they are doing I think, some incredible things around culture in the organization. We have an employee engagement committee that is driving some great initiatives here, and um, we do a lot of employee appreciation events where they're not only learning opportunities, it's where we come together as our internal work community to meet one another. Yeah, just really, really great things. And all of that, right, transpires out to our community, right? If we have good employee morale and engagement internally, that transpires out to, I think, great service to our community, interactions with our community. The same if we have a good culture of accountability, we tend to offer, I think employees tend to offer more timely service and they feel accountable for their work. So it's all interconnected, right? But Dominic, I'd love to hear like if you did anything at the County of Marin.
So actually, in all of the years that I've been in OD work, I do a lot of needs analysis or
Yeah,
cultural analysis, looking for sentiment, um, really focused on like either via employee surveys with some parameters, anonymity, explaining the process, using a group like you talked about, Barb, to kind of
yeah,
build it out. So it wasn't built out by HR or the L&OD person. It was built out by the community that it's actually serving. So employee surveys, I've also done focus groups because what I've found that some people are not very interested in surveys, but they really want to have a one-to-one or group conversation. So I've done that a lot to get it. The other part of it is this, and I know this is not something that we do a lot in public service, but something I would say that we should really consider leadership effectiveness surveys, like 360s,
oh yeah.
which
I
can be, you
I'm
have? Oh, good.
No, I've worked in public sector organizations that have done the
Great.
360s. Yeah, those are great. I
It's
agree.
a great way to balance off to see that. So I love a survey. I think it's great, but it's also that it becomes back to what Conrad said. It's data driven. When I show it to you in the data, you can't say, "Oh, that's not really what's happening," because your impression of what's going on, and here it is in data. It can relate back to budgeting, but it also gives you key areas and pain points that you can address based upon customer or voice of the employee, which I can't. Barb, what Barb said is so right. The voice of the employee totally relates exactly back to how our clients, our citizenry feel when they come into our offices or call us on the phone and ask for help. So, in saying that, I'm going to add one more piece. We need to make sure that we start to try to do or think about doing surveys of our citizens. I know Conrad just said some things that were maybe how they're approaching it. So, I'd love to hear about how they're using, like just finding out how the citizens feel about the customer relations they're receiving.
We do. Yolanda Taylor, one of our technical hosts, just reminded me that for our management institute, our cohort, they take a 360 leadership self-assessment, so that when they come into the academy, they have a good idea of what their leadership parameters are, what challenges areas that they're challenged on, areas of where they can improve in their leadership skills, and that some of those core areas that they would need to help to develop communities, right? To develop their employees, to develop those help to develop those communities and provide those services. So thank you so much for providing that insight on some of those initiatives. So we've heard about the current state of culture and its impact. So we'll shift gears a little bit and talk about how we can cultivate a strong and positive organizational culture moving forward. And we'd spoken a bit just before the session about some of the current and modern issues that are occurring. Our policymakers making changes to the way things are that have some very real impacts at our at our local level and for our most vulnerable folks in the communities. And we have had to shift gears on what our plans are and what our organizational goals are, so that we can continue to adapt and maintain a level of service that is amenable to our communities. Could each of you share some specific initiatives? And I know you have had already provided some tools on some of those things that are ongoing now, but maybe some specific initiatives or strategies that you are looking forward to, or maybe have implemented or have witnessed to shape or improve the culture within those organizations, given the rapid changes of what our organizations look like on the daily now. And
Well,
anyone, please.
I can start. One of the things that we're doing, that I am working on specifically, is doing a needs assessment of the organization. Dominique, when you mentioned that, it resonated with me because you need to go out and talk to your community, right? And get their feedback, what their needs are, what is of importance and value to them. Like I said, we just launched this new onboarding program that is all about building relationships with employees and their direct supervisors, building that engagement. We also utilize the Gallup Employee Engagement Survey here at the district. The employee appreciation events. There's a lot going on. Some of the things when I talk about culture is what makes Marin Water unique. And part of it is the onboarding process, that when new employees come on board, they go on a pontoon boat up in the watershed, and they have this incredible, unique experience. And it's just something unique to our culture. So I think it's ongoing. This, like you said, it's shifting and changing all the time. With all the changes around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, what's happening there, we are moving full force forward with our program. We believe in our program. We believe in the importance and celebrate the diversity of our workforce and the value in learning from one another. So I think it's you kind of build it as you go. You have a plan, and then the plan changes, the plan shifts, right? So you have to be adaptable and good at change management, I would say.
Thank you. Dominique, Conrad, any thoughts on initiatives that might have, maybe you were moving in one direction and have had to pivot as of late, given some of our leadership, the changing goals in their strategy for leading our labor force in these communities?
I'm sorry, Conrad and I are just looking at each other, smiling, and I'm like, who's going to go first? Conrad,
Go ahead.
please. Okay, I will share that, now being on the outside and being more of a consultant, some of the things that I have focused on were some things that has changed a little bit. I actually have been focusing a lot around executive leadership and mid-career leadership, focused on one-to-one trainings with them or coaching, but also inclusive leadership. I approach it from inclusive leadership and talk about belonging and how important that is within any workforce. And that has been a market that's on the decline, but it's still something that I do, and I think it's still something that's super important for especially the next generation of leaders. So I will say to that, some of the things that I've done is more targeted development for leadership skills, really preparing that next generation, providing that one-to-one coaching, but also giving them peer coaches. The other thing that I love to do is not mentorships, but I do a lot of sponsorship programs. So maybe there's someone that you see and you see the work that they're doing, and maybe they're not in the organization you're in right now, and we go out and try to get that person to sponsor you. So you have someone to openly talk to about your career goals and what you're trying to look into do. So those are things that I've done besides just circles. But I think one of the big pulls for me as to why I like to focus on mid-career employees is because that is where it tends to be, we see more regretted attrition. We're losing numbers of people who really are there and who want to continue to grow and just don't see the ladder for them. And so that has been my biggest pet peeve, but also my biggest focus area, because I just think there's so much growth and potential that's there.
And Dominique, I have a question for you. Why
Sure.
don't you think they see the latter? What is the organization not providing?
I think it's so much of when you come in and it's like, this is how it's been. And so in your mind, sometimes you see, oh, these are the people that are in leadership. And maybe I don't necessarily connect with that person, or I don't see how my authentic self can be in that role. And I think it's really just a question of confidence, but also remembering you can innovate. Like just because that last generation was all of this or all male
Mhm.
or anything doesn't mean it's not for you. And also sitting down with people, I feel like this is one of the things we miss because we look at job descriptions in government and we don't coach them on doing individual development plans and giving them ways and
We are
ideas.
here.
Yeah. Oh, see, you're so ahead of the game of working on how to look at those gaps in your experiences and jumping them.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that I've been focused on lately.
I I love that. You kind of like perfect segue, but because I think what I want you said the right word, generation, right? So I think this work is going to take some time. I really was reflecting on this before we got to speak here today, and I think what's happened is public sector for so long has been compliance driven. It's filling in the boxes, checklist, this, that, getting stuff done. And so the people that get hired and promoted are the ones that do that, right? They just follow direction, very good at following direction. And I came from that generation, so the Gen X folks. But I think the younger generation, the millennials and Gen Zs, are really asking very good questions about what the future holds and what are the opportunities for different kinds of leadership. So a lot of times when we talk about DEI work, where the piece that seems to be missing is diversity of thought or neurodivergent leaders. Just I think we're so wanting to be compliance driven in the public sector. It's just the nature of the structure. It's nobody's fault. But it's very clear to see that. Like people sometimes like there's jokes and people like, oh, if you have a personality, I don't know if you could be at the next level because there's some reality. And I think the challenge these days is now you've also got a governing board or governing boards that are putting a lot of pressure. So, I think the ability to manage both those become very difficult at the highest level. And I think what I would love to see more people leaders, but again, we've got to build for that, right? And so it takes a very courageous executive or leadership team that wants to bring people in with differing perspectives, but everyone's moving so quickly, it's so fast that I almost think it's going to take a little bit of time till we get younger leaders in who are seeing the importance of people skills. And with AI and technology, even more reason to have emotionally intelligent leaders. We also have a coaching program in the county where we coach new managers, and that program has been working really well. We have internal certified coaches. I'm part of that process, and I've had a chance to work with so many managers who their supervisor just doesn't have time. And so we're talking about other things, how you show up, how you support people. But I think in the past, I think maybe there was a luxury for managers to be managers, but most managers these days are just working managers. So this culture work to me it almost needs sacred time. Culture doesn't happen without actually planning for it. And I think we need to carve that out. Like leaders need carved time to walk around, to check in on people. You said, Barb mentioned recognition, such a big component. But it's like if leaders don't have time, they barely have time to say hi to their staff. And I remember years ago, I was worked in one of our departments, and the staff were upset that the director never said hi to them. I was like, well, the director probably has a million things on their plate, and they're running from meeting to meeting. Wouldn't it be nice if that director had been given some leeway? Now, they could still have said hi, I suppose. But I'm just saying, if people they're just kind of at their wits' end, the culture work becomes very difficult. And that's, I think, what you were saying earlier, like when there are incidents that happen, people revert back to what's real, right? So if you've built the culture and you've invested in your employees, and we saw this during the pandemic, those units, those departments that had that safety, people were like, I'll do whatever. And those that weren't were like, don't ask me to come in. I'm not coming in for this. And so I think, we only sort of see the effects of culture sometimes, unfortunately, when things don't go well. But you could see that both ways. So I think that investment, the time to really to pay attention to your teams. But like I said, I think we're getting to a point where things are moving so fast. How do you get that time? And I think that's the question some of our managers will ask. How am I supposed to do this work? I don't have time. And then if it's not modeled, how are they doing it? Right? Because if they're trying to model it and the people at the top are like, just get your work done, then that's also challenging. So this is generational. I think it takes some time. I'm hoping sooner than later, but I think the awareness and a conversation like this is just something to, build from.
Can I just add one thing? I just want to add the importance of continuous learning, not just for myself in the work that I do, but providing that to our organizations, right, to our staff, that we give them the support and the tools to do the work that we're asking them to do. If we're asking for organizational change and change in culture, providing them with the support to be able to do the work. So in a time where I'm hearing about so many training and OD programs being cut, I really just want to stress the importance of keeping that continuous learning happening in organizations. And even through budget cuts, there's ways to do it. It's leadership book clubs. It's coming up with creative ways within your organization to keep the conversations going, those important conversations about what's happening in the world that's impacting us, that impacts our work that we do with our communities.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Oh, Dominique.
I'm so sorry. I know we want to get to the Q&A, but Barbara just brought this up and I was like, oh, I have to share it. When we were talking earlier, Conrad just mentioned AI, and I feel like AI is one of those things that is like so scary. There's pros and cons to it at all times. But from an HR perspective, most people use like an ATS system, application tracking system, right? Who is looking at the keywords and stuff. I always think about what it would be to take away the fear of AI within local government by creating a cross-functional group on how to use AI more effectively for timely processes, like application processes, permit processes, going back to always remaining innovative and giving them the time for continuous learning, but continuous improvement of processes, because they're on the front line. They know what's not working well to build up for like us to remain customer centric. So when Barb said that, I was like, oh yeah, I want to share because there's so much you can do if you can use AI to help you out.
Yes, absolutely. And I do really appreciate that you brought up the, technology and how that folds into the culture of our organizations, how that might have an impact on our future leaders and, and even how we provide service as a result. So, and as you mentioned, Dominique, we are moving into our Q&A session. Thank you so much for fielding all of those questions. But now I'm going to hand it over to our attendees, and we have a couple questions. I'll ask a general one first, and this one is surrounding DEI and the federal attack that took place some time ago. How has that federal attack on DEI, how has it affected local government organizations? Not just, I would say specifically in California, because we are so unlike many of our other jurisdictions in the diversity and the breadth of the themes that we have here. What have you seen in your organizations with regards to the change in policy and language surrounding DEI?
If I could, if I could jump in, I had said earlier, we had started this wellness journey like 25 plus years. We've been on the engagement journey over the last, 15 years, and then DEI over the last few years. I think for us, I think we've seen DEI being built on top of these other components. And now we're coming to see there's sort of a universality around these topics. And maybe we're calling it belonging. But I don't think the work goes away because it's all connected. If you don't feel safe at work, either because of your race or whatever, that's the whole psychological safety piece. That's a wellness piece, that's an engagement piece, that's a DEI piece. So where we are looking at is sort of the convergence of all this work, like how people get to show up at work. And so we're not so focused on the word because of whatever, connotations people have around it. But I think even more so than before, the belonging work is more important. So maybe what we're going to see is some language around this work changing, but it's all interconnected. You can't separate psychological safety. That doesn't belong just to DEI. That belongs to engagement. That belongs to wellness. So all these pieces are interconnected. I think we're going to see more synergy. And I think there's more need for that because ultimately it comes back to culture. And so rather seeing it in one stream, like seeing it for the intersectionality, I think is going to be important.
I couldn't have said it better. I think Conrad, I don't know how you feel, Dominique, but I feel like Conrad, you just made the perfect statement. Yeah.
Thank you.
Couldn't agree more. That is really it. The work remains. And I find that for me, it's like in some ways, because I've been doing DEI since like 1997, having to change the language of it, but the importance of it and inclusivity and intersectionality at the key of it, that is what culture is about. If I cannot show up and be, like we talked about, feeling like people get me, I can be my authentic self, how long am I going to stay in that culture? So it all comes back down to workplace culture.
Right. And, and creating that safe space, right, to within organizations. Yeah, like I said, we are moving full force ahead with our diversity inclusion program here. It's a high priority for us. It's like Conrad mentioned, it's all encompassing. You really can't separate it out from culture. It is
Thank you.
culture.
Yeah,
It's people.
it's culture. Yes, thank you so much. So we do have a couple other questions. I know that they might be focused to one panelist or another, but I believe that any one of you may be able to answer. If you could talk about, and Dominique, this was a focus to you, but again, any one of you that have experience with this may be able to answer. If you could speak more about the peer-to-peer conflict resolution, how you trained employees in conflict resolution, or maybe you've had some experience with that, and the frequency of its use. And what would you do if a significant number of conflicts occurred with one particular employee?
Thank you for that. So the peer-to-peer conflict resolution program was basically a volunteer program. I consider it to be a business resource group. I put out a calling to say people who are interested, you're going to get trained and a little bit of coaching and also just mediation services. I will say this, how did I train employees? I actually am a certified mediator and trainer, and I have a law degree, which I have paid off. But regardless, I did ADR before and civil rights work in the past. So I actually helped train them, and I actually also brought in people and train them on how to walk people through talking about conflict. And the reason I say peer to peer is that because I also used to do EEO complaints, it's not supervisor and peer, it's just peer to peer. And the person that comes in is another peer from another group to talk about conflicts within like respect and communications within the group. I will tell you that it was easy to create and even easier because I got buy-in and support from the unions
Mm.
Oh,
who were
great.
like, thank you. So that takes a little bit of onus off of them from calls around things like this. And it would happen probably one or two a month. There were never any repeat offenders per se. And I would say that because I'd done EEO complaints or in complaints in general, if there was more repeats, and that would be one where I'd say, unfortunately, our group will not be able to take this one because recently you used our services because it was volunteer. So, and it would all come through an application process to me for a review to see if it was even appropriate. But some of the information is still posted up on Marin County's website. And if you don't find it there, Elizabeth, I think it is, feel free to email me and I'll send you copies of the process that I went through. And even I created like a grounding agreement for people to sign. And I created an agreement for like, what are the responsibilities? What are your responsibilities? And I also will tell you this, I never, the part of the process was that you just didn't walk away having a conversation. You walked away with a written, it could be an email between the two people that were having this issue, understanding of how we were going to work together to solve this so that they had steps to go back and forward to keep the communication lines open.
So Dominique, I have a question. So it
Sure.
wasn't, it was you doing the peer-to-peer coaching, or was it was other
It
peers
was
and
other employees.
okay. Did you do so I'm just wondering, did you do a train the trainer model, or how did you train them on how to be effective coaches, or
I trained them on how to be effective coaches
okay.
and also some understanding of like the conflict resolution and took
Uh-huh.
them through, and we actually did case studies. We had group
Yeah,
sessions together. It was really a fun time.
great.
Thank you.
What a great concept. And if you're able to really articulate to all of the folks in your camp, what the culture should look like. We should all respect one another. We should all have empathy towards one another. We should listen and, respond respectively and kind, and all of those things that go towards how we want to uh, feel inclusive and be able to communicate. Those are all important aspects of how we can create a culture where folks want to continue to come back to every day. We spend a lot of our time with these folks and or working for these folks. And so we want to create a space that is going to resonate with our overarching goals for assisting and supporting and servicing our communities. One more question, and then we can wrap this beautiful discussion up. Conrad discussed the cost of losing talent due to culture. So, for any one of you, how do you know when employees are leaving due to culture?
We've done a lot of work on our exit survey process. It's still not very smooth or easy because usually when people are leaving, either they're really happy or they're not. And so sometimes they'll give feedback, but people always are not sure how that feedback will be taken. So it's not a foolproof methodology. We've tried to collect this information. We have a survey that people can take after they leave the organization. So we do know that sometimes it is for culture reasons. It's very hard though. Again, one has to look at the number of people saying that. So I think the traction on it is a little harder to get. In a large organization, say if you have like a few people leaving because of culture, you're like, okay, that's in one unit. What do you actually get to do with that? But in our engagement survey, we do have a question that says, do you plan to remain with the organization over the next 12 months? And it's yes, no, maybe. And that sometimes is very helpful. If you have a large no or maybe, you're like, okay, we know something's going on here. But yeah, I think and this is the challenge we have in public sector, even when you have data and then you share that data, ultimately it does become, we're not an enforcement agency. I think when culture becomes enforcement, that's a problem, right? You have the other parts of HR to do that, the employee relations and all that. So I think a lot of the offerings and learning and OD, it's all about being supportive. It's all about being a consultant. So you can just show the data to a leader, and then what they do with that data is up to them, right? That's the challenge I think we have, again, like I was talking about metrics and how to make the changes over time. So I think that's the piece. So we may know people are leaving. The other tricky part is being in the Bay Area, we're in a very competitive environment. So people are jumping to other agencies. Again, if culture is not important, then yeah, makes sense. If you worked with a great team and you like coming to work, then you are not necessarily looking to make that jump. I think it's very clear. And in fact, there's research that shows if you have a friend at work, you're more likely to stay in the job and you're more likely to contribute, right? But if it's just transactional, which happens, and then yeah, people are going to leave at the drop of a hat just because there's nothing to hold on to. So that's sort of my take. I'll defer to Dominique and Barb.
Yeah, no. Well, I would just like, my favorite quote around culture. Culture is how someone feels Sunday evening about going to work Monday morning. And I personally, I feel like when anybody leaves, there's a piece of it that is about culture. Because even if it's, they're having some issue directly with their direct supervisor, so that's culture. We're talking about people in an organization. So we need to always be looking at our culture in our organization and adjusting and being aware. And I would say also that when you see organizations that are struggling and there's a department that is thriving, even though the rest of the organization is struggling, it's because they have created a safe environment, right? Where people are not afraid to speak up and share, and they are self-motivated to come to work. They want to come to work. They have got this great environment that they're going into. So I think there's always a little bit about culture why people leave. I don't think you can separate it personally. I don't know, Dominique, I'd love to hear you chime in.
I know we have like a minute left. I think it's hard to separate it. The other thing, I love a good survey, and I know, Conrad, I've been there.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to get people to do it. I have actually seen my numbers increase when I've offered people calls, just one-to-one calls. It's time consuming. But I've done that. Before we, get out of this, I do want people to remember though, using customer data, your clients, your citizenry, figuring out how they're feeling about the delivery of services is amazing. And if you haven't ever thought of this or tried it, think about having like a secret shopper come in to one of your offices that's open to see how they're engaged, because that tells you right there that there's something that we need to work on, either if it's a process improvement or with our people. So
like Undercover Boss.
Yes.
Yes, totally.
Okay.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Conrad Fernandez, Barb Otis, Dominique Burton, for helping us discuss how we can keep our organizational culture on track. This has been a tremendous discussion, and I hope our attendees were able to receive a lot from it. And I hope that we are able to see you all at our next webinar. Please keep track of our events in our calendars on rgs.ca.gov. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you.